women especially got upset if their backup mate fell in love with another woman or became seriously involved with
Dr.
another
Buss,
woman.
I can tell you empirically, anecdotally, that this is 100%. The dual mating strategy versus the mate switching strategy. This is something, Dr. Buss, when I talk to some of my female friends, they have a hard time with, because I'm still back and trying to explain to them that monogamy might not be the natural state for Homo sapiens. And then when we start talking about a mate switching strategy, that is kind of mind blowing for them. So can you go over initially your hypothesis about?
Well, the issue of why men have affairs. So men in committed marriages or relationships, why do they have affairs is fairly straightforward from an evolutionary perspective. The dominant motivation is desire for sexual variety, sheer novelty. It's a woman you haven't slept with. The opportunity presented itself, and men are very attuned to sexual opportunities, especially when they're low risk and low cost and don't involve, encumbering, entangling alliances. Now, why women have affairs is a more interesting question. Because their desire for sexual variety, while it exists, is not as great as men's desire for sexual variety. And fewer women who say that when you ask, why did you have an affair? They don't say, oh, well, the opportunity presented itself, or there was a novel guy I wanted to sleep with, or just sheer sexual gratification. They rarely mention that. Why do women do it? This is a puzzle. One hypothesis is the dual mating strategy hypothesis. This is basically that women get investment from one guy and good genes from another guy. And what that implies, the clear prediction from that, is that when women are ovulating, that is, women not on the pill, not on hormonal contraceptives, when women are ovulating, that's when they're going to have sex with the guy who has good genes. And then when they're not ovulating, they'll have sex with their regular partner who has good dad qualities, high investment proclivities, but not perhaps the best genes.
So the way I've explained this to my friends is she marries the accountant and sleeps with the bartender.
Or I would put it that she marries the guy who's going to be a good dad.
Yes.
And a Boy Scout, honest, reliable, dependable, or whatever. And she wants to have sex with the bad boy.
Yes.
The exciting, good-looking, slightly arrogant, risk-taking guy, who has more masculine features, perhaps more symmetrical features. So anyway, that's the dual mating strategy. So in an ideal world, it's actually a good mating strategy if it could work. So that is, you get, because often the guys who are, sometimes it's referred to as the cads versus the dads,
right?
In mate selection. Well, there's several problems. One is that the early studies showed these strong ovulation effects, such that when women are ovulating, they prefer more masculine, more symmetrical guys. But in recent years, in the last few years even, larger scale studies done in Europe, UK, and Germany have found either no effects, so it's failure to replicate, or weaker effects. And that's one of the key sources of evidence for the dual mating strategy.
Kim, before you go on, let's go back to the beginning where I said a testable framework for human psychology, and that now here was a situation to falsify something that you believed previously, and you've taken in new information, and now the hypothesis has changed. This is what I want to talk about before, and so now we move forward with the testable framework has now switched because new information has come in. For those of you who think that this is some dogma, it is not. It is a testable framework, and as new information comes in, then the hypothesis change. This is a great example of it. Anyway, go.
Yes,
go.
You're absolutely right. It's a perfect example. What I argue in my new book, the mate switching hypothesis, is a more tenable hypothesis for why women have affairs. So what's the evidence for this? Well, for one thing, women who have affairs tend to be dissatisfied with their primary relationship, both sexually dissatisfied and emotionally dissatisfied. Now, this may seem like the most obvious thing in the world. Well, of course, people who have affairs are unhappy with their relationship. But the interesting thing is it's true for women, but not true for men. So if you compare men who have affairs versus men who don't have affairs, there's no difference in their marital or relationship happiness. But there is for women. Women who have affairs are much more unhappy, and women who don't have affairs are much happier in their relationship. Okay, second is that women who have affairs, in sharp contrast to men, a majority of them fall in love with or become emotionally attached to their affair partner. Now, if all you're if all a woman is wanting from a guy is good genes, she wants to ovulate, get the good genes, and then get out of Dodge, then falling in love with her, becoming attached to this affair partner is a terrible solution. What you want is you want to maintain your secure attachment to the high investing good dad, have sex with the good genes guy, and that's it. You combine these two, women are falling in love with their affair partners, and they're unhappy with their primary partners. This suggests to me one of a couple of variants of the mate switching. Okay, one is women have affairs to cultivate mate insurance. So something like we have car insurance, we have house insurance. If something bad might happen to our car or house, we have mate insurance because something bad might happen to our regular mateship. And we know over evolutionary time, a primary mate could get injured, could get killed, could get suffer a blow to his status, etc.
Or the tribe was conquered by another tribe. When you think about when I bring this up to women sometimes or to men, and it's a very dark way to look at Homo sapien evolution. But when you think about even Genghis Khan, at one point I believe it killed 10% of the human population. If you think about women in those periods, what was more adaptive? The woman who would take on a new partner, or the woman who wouldn't? The woman who wouldn't was not one of our ancestors, and that was one of the problems. Is like the adaptive nature of losing your male partner to war, to violence, or to a hunting accident throughout the ancestral period. That would be something that would be adaptive. So the idea of a woman being able to switch mates, or even men for that matter too, would be something that would be adaptive.
And we know that over human evolutionary history, intergroup warfare has been very common, as well as even within group violence. So mate insurance, trading up, women can use affairs to trade up to a better partner. So her current mate might have lost mate value, loses his job, he's no longer a good provider, or he becomes an alcoholic or addicted to drugs, and or he becomes abusive. And so mate switching, trading up to a higher mate value partner, or even using the affair as a way to transition back into the mating pool to see if there's a better mate out there for her. And so I think that if you look at the weight of the evidence, in my mind, I used to believe that the dual mating strategy was the best hypothesis to explain why women have affairs. I no longer believe that. I think the mate switching accounts for much more, a much larger percentage of why women have affairs. Now, it's possible, of course, that both could have some merits to them. But I think at this point in the science, the dual mating strategy hypothesis is at a minimum no longer as credible as it was before, given these failures to replicate.
And to quote your book, 79% of women said that they were falling in the surveys that you did of women who cheated. 79% of women reported that they fell in love with the person, their affair partner, and only 30% of men did. So that would lay credence to your belief that when women cheat, their intention is to end the relationship. When men cheat, that's not necessarily the case.
Right. Yeah. And they might not even be aware of their intention at the time. That is, they may just meet someone and find them attractive and have sex with them. But, once they start the affair, you ask them, well, why did you do this? And then they reveal what you just described.
Can we talk about, because you mentioned this about mate insurance, the backup mating strategy is something I had no idea about until your most recent book.
Yeah. Well, it's basically the same logic as what we've been talking about, that is something bad can always happen to your mateship. We know that in addition to the things we talked about, injury, death to the regular mate, lowering in status, et cetera, your mate could dump you, and so if you have a backup, so a woman who is left without cultivating potential backup mates, she would be kind of stranded and have to start mating from square one. Whereas if she's cultivated a couple backup mates, then she can transition to those backup mates if something should happen to a regular mateship. And this is why these are studies I did with Josh Duntley, a former student of mine who's now a professor of criminology. And what we found, and this was kind of surprising to us, is that women especially got upset if their backup mate fell in love with another woman or became seriously involved with another woman.
Dr. Buss, I can tell you empirically, anecdotally, that this is 100% accurate. Yes.
Yeah.
I've absolutely been in situations before where I ended relationships with somebody and I believed it to be amicable. And when I started seeing someone who was as attractive or more attractive than them, the behavior was so irrational that I couldn't understand why. I was like, you're with someone else. Why are we fighting? I don't understand what's going on. And when I heard this backup mating strategy hypothesis, I was like, again, evolutionary psychology to the rescue. Once again, a thing I didn't understand that is very clearly explained here.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
But the example you give in the book is literally a woman who leaves her husband. They're both scientists. Leaves her husband, and then she goes off and she's with someone else. He's taking care of the kids, and then when he finds someone else, she comes home and breaks stuff at the house.
Right. Yeah, and which seems like totally irrational because she was the one who had the affair. She was the one who wanted to end the relationship. And then, so why is she getting so upset when he gets involved with someone else? Well, the mate switching, the backup mate hypothesis explains that. He was initially willing to wait in the wings and wait till the affair burned itself out, and then he would be the backup and be content to get back together with her. And so, but once he gets remated, fell in love, and actually subsequently got married. That backup mate got terminated. So yeah, these things. I mean, I see examples of this all over the place.
And I'll bet you, if you asked her, she probably started feeling some stress and couldn't even explain why. I'll bet you it was something. It was again. This is what we talk about when something is pervasive amongst Homo sapiens. This is what I say: if anything is pervasive amongst Homo sapiens, it must fit somewhere in evolution.